All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. I just want to give you for today a sort of a pre-video to your homework, just to kind of set up what you're doing and why you're doing it. We've reached the point in the course now where we really are practicing for our first paper, which is rhetorical analysis. So it seems to make sense that we'd look at just a description of your upcoming paper, your first major paper for the course, and to do that first. So we'll just see here. It's a rhetorical analysis of one text from something you'll be reading for tomorrow. Just practicing more rhetorical analysis today. I'll be giving you these Sierra Club's Grand Canyon documents soon enough. They'll be there. You'll find them on D2L. So what's it going to look like, this paper? It's going to be 3 to 4 full pages. That'll be double spaced, Times New Roman, 12 font. This is 20% of your grade, fairly major portion of your grade. We have been talking about rhetoric and public sphere and all this type of thing for a while. So we'll be doing this now. You will have a chance to revise this paper. Remember my revision policy. After you turn this into me in the not so distant future, I will give you individualized audio feedback, and you can revise your document according to that. Remember that this assignment is essentially academic writing, and we'll talk more about some of the expectations for academic writing in a future video in just a few days. But what's the gist of this here? It's a rhetorical analysis. Who's your audience? Informed, capable readers, mildly familiar with environmental rhetoric, but unfamiliar with these documents, the Sierra Club Grand Canyon documents that you can read. If you're curious, we have a video to watch. Perhaps you've already watched it on the Grand Canyon documents, but there was a time when the Grand Canyon was going to be dammed in order to turn it into a place of hydroelectric power and to promote tourism, boating and whatnot. So we wouldn't have the Grand Canyon. It would have been filled in with water, and it still might be if it weren't for the Sierra Club. So they are heroes in many ways, right? We have the Grand Canyon because of them. Most people don't know this, but we'll be reading about that, and we'll be reading the documents that the Sierra Club used to, on the national level, make this an issue that the Grand Canyon should not be filled with water, should not be dammed up. And that's what we're analyzing. We're going to analyze the various forms of rhetoric they used that realistically saved the day, kept the Grand Canyon, right, rather than a lake. The purpose, and here's one way to think of this. You might be helped by imagining that you're employed by the Sierra Club today, and they've asked you to go back into the archives and analyze, what did the Grand Canyon documents do so well? What were the rhetorical devices that made that campaign to save the Grand Canyon so successful? So that is your job. You are the language guru for the Sierra Club, and you're going to go back and you're sort of writing a report on just a couple of things that they did really, really well in their documents. You will be analyzing 1 to 2 documents. You'll have about 5 to choose from. So that gets down to your task. You've analyzed discourse, communities, and publics, and you've analyzed rhetoric as well. So you could use any of these things when you do analyze the Sierra Club documents. If you just do rhetorical analysis and the types of rhetoric that they use, that's fine. You can talk about the type of publics that are implied, as we've talked about with some of the other readings so far in this class. I gave you that nice long list of everything that a public has or that happens in the public sphere. You could draw on some of that if you wanted to, but if you're uncomfortable with that, you can just analyze the language, and that would be just fine too. It's 3 to 4 pages. You're going to need at least 2 ideas, 2 forms of rhetoric, or 2 ways to analyze the language of this piece, and maybe even 3. You'll have to wait and see how many examples you have. So the rhetorical analysis, you'll spend the body of your paper analyzing these 2 to 3 repeated forms. How many examples of each do you need to have? At least 3. 3 is a pattern, right? 2 might be a coincidence, but 3 is a pattern. So you need 3 of something, some rhetorical device, in order to make this assignment go. Remember that rhetoric is not what they're saying necessarily, but how they said it. Personification, metaphor, apocalyptic rhetoric, right? Ethos, pathos, logos, all these things that we've talked about, right? So you'll be looking for at least 3 examples of each. What are you going to want to do beyond that, rather than just saying, I found 3 examples? You want to show why they're similar. You want to describe why they are that very thing that you say it is. So you need a definition of that thing, and we'll get to that in a second. So you need the definition, you need to describe why they meet that definition, and the other thing you want to do is show how the Sierra Club is using them similarly, yet that they're a little bit different too, even though they're all matching the definition. That's going to give you more to say, kind of compare and contrast the uses. So if one personification is meant to help the reader identify with the Sierra Club, maybe another use of personification is to somehow make a villain of somebody else, right? Or to bring water to life versus bringing rock to life through personification. So just point out the little differences too. That's going to give you more to say and give you a more in-depth analysis. The other thing you can say is why it likely has an effect on the reader. You could describe that inside of the definition that you'll offer for your rhetorical device that you choose. You might also want to talk about why any rhetorical device would turn the reader toward the Sierra Club's values, right? So you can mention that in each paragraph as well. That, personification, personifying the Grand Canyon, for instance, would likely help the reader take on the Sierra Club's values. And so that would be a great thing to say as well. So here are a few questions you want to answer. They're basically the things I just talked about. So it looks like I've got them all here for you. So there you go. That should be helpful, even though I said them out loud too and talked through them. As I said, you want at least 3 instances of each, and you'll probably need 2 to 3 different forms of rhetoric. Here's some other things that you'll want. Here's the format for the introductory paragraph and other considerations. So you take a look at that. I think from here maybe we'll move on and we'll talk about the setup for the daily homework and some of the practicing that we'll be doing until we write this paper in just a few days. So the next thing that you'll probably be happy to see, if I've got it here, let me take a look. Must be behind me. There it is. Here's a list of common rhetorical devices that you'll certainly find in the Sierra Club documents and some of the other things that we'll practice on. The essay that you'll practice on the most before the Sierra Club documents is a reading connected to today, and that is Save the Whales, Screw the Shrimp, a really fun essay that I think you'll enjoy reading, and that has all of these things in it, as do the Sierra Club. So here's some common things you can look for your first assignment. Personification, metaphor, simile, metonymy, understatement, hyperbole, change in point of view. These I'll kind of let you figure out. You probably already know what they are, but I'll let you figure them out by reading about them. You can read about them more online if you need to, if you want more examples. Change in point of view, that could be looking at when we is used versus when I is used versus when the third person is used, right? They all have different effects and draw people in or distance us from the reader differently. So you can think about that. Imagistic writing, uses of image can be valid. Ethos, pathos, logos, you're going to find plenty of that in the practice readings and in the Sierra Club documents for your actual paper. And last but not least, dystopian rhetoric, which we've called in the course so far apocalyptic rhetoric, simply because our other readings called it that. If you'd like to call it dystopian rhetoric now, that's fine. But basically it shows that things are going wrong or going to go wrong in the future. And that is our apocalyptic rhetoric that we saw in Silent Spring, right? So these are all things that you'll see and that you'll find in the documents, the practice documents, and the Sierra Club Grand Canyon documents. So look for these things. So what are we going to do to practice early on? Well, you've got 2 readings to accompany this. The first thing I want you to do, before you even have to find these things in a reading, the first thing I would like you to do is this. Give this a read. You can start to analyze some of its rhetoric and look for some of these patterns. Remember, if you see something 3 times, we're going to call that a pattern, right? At least for our purposes for this class. That's something you can start to comment on in all the ways that I mentioned just a minute ago to build your argument, to describe how it's working and functioning as a rhetorical device to persuade someone inside of a reading. Now, what I want you to do for your post today, though, is read this and analyze it and see what you see. That would be very, very helpful. But at the end of this as well, you'll note that you have a bunch of sample rhetorical analyses. I want you to rank these best to worst, and I want you to look at the first 4. You can see some are a little bit shorter, and that's fine. Your paper will be longer than all of these, even though some of these are decently long, and Perhaps your paper won't have to be too much longer than that. But these are a bit shorter than your paper will be. They don't really have an introduction in the way that I ask for an introduction in the paper if you look back at the assignment description. But we're doing this for several reasons. One, this is going to expose you to 4 different types of rhetorical analysis of this essay, A Change of Heart About Animals. And you can see 4 different approaches, not just to analyzing rhetoric, but to writing a rhetorical analysis. So I want you to look at how each of these authors do what they do when they analyze the rhetoric. But I also want you to look at how they're writing about it, what an effective introduction seems to be, how to group your paragraphs, the types of things you might say to extend these ideas, to extend your analysis and have some depth to your rhetorical analysis. So that's what I want you to rank. How good is the thinking and the analysis, and how well are these written? And I want you to rank them 1 through 4 as part of your post for today. So you can really think about what works in a rhetorical analysis and what doesn't work. And this is, of course, going to prime you to write your own paper. So that's what I want you to do here. Just 4 will do. So go ahead and rank those. You've got more on D2 all about how to do this. And that's going to be a nice bit of work for this essay. Of course, students often find there's many other forms of rhetoric in here that those 4 samples don't analyze, and that's great to see too. That's really where we are in the course right now, is looking at rhetorical devices, stylist experimentation, the very patterned use of these things. And that's what a large part of our course is. The other thing I would like you to do then is read this essay, Save the Whale, Screw the Shrimp. Not incredibly long, about 8 pages or so. Really, really fun essay that is loaded with all different rhetorical devices. All of, see if we can get it here, these rhetorical devices and more, right? You'll see them all there though. And so what I'd like you to do is just in your head, imagine you're writing your paper where you've got to pick out 2 or 3 rhetorical devices, 2 or 3 of these rhetorical devices, the many that are mentioned there. Again, this is an environmental essay. So you might pick out dystopian rhetoric and logos as the 2 main things that you're interested in. Maybe logos because logos is linked to scientific writing, and scientific writing is a large part of environmental writing. And we also know from our readings, though, that dystopian rhetoric is the response to that, to point out that, hey, this logic may not get us everywhere we need to go. So that would be 2 that you could concentrate on. You might need 1 more, right? And I just want you to go ahead and read through this and look for the patterns. If I were you, I would look for all of these patterns to great extent. Look for personification, look for metaphor, look for several instances, look at how they're used the same, look at how they're used differently, look at why they might be persuasive, look at how they draw us into the author's values, and that would be great. You can look at point of view. This essay has numerous changes in point of view, so much so that some people have felt that this author is attacking them and calling them a poor environmentalist. I'm going to suggest something else is going on in this essay, and that is that this essay, Save the Whale, Screw the Shrimp, the author Joy Williams is saying that all of us, including herself, have inside of us an environmentalist and a part of us that claims to be a good environmentalist, but really isn't. And so she's getting at the very complex ways that we think about the environment. We want to do good, but we can't always live up to it. And maybe the world doesn't even always offer the opportunity to live sustainably, right? And so that's what's going on with the change in point of view. It's very, very ironic, and I think you'll appreciate that about the essay. Most people, sort of get the humor. Every once in a while, people don't, and they think that she's very, very angry and accusative. I'm going to suggest you don't need to read it like that, and read it as a comedy piece that shows that it's hard to escape the systems we live in. Beyond that, you can also read this for the publics and discourse communities implied, farmers, ranchers, tourists, tourism companies, the government, the EPA. There's just a ton of stuff existing in here. So different types of commerce, different types of consumers, different types of regulatory agencies, all of them connected to the public, all of them critiqued for the type of power, the type of behavior that they have, their different viewpoints on the environment that maybe they don't state but are implied through their actions. Everything that we've talked about in this course so far, not just about the environment, but about public sphere, discourse communities, their behaviors and values and goals and motivations, all of that in here, in a very, very comedic way analyzed. So I hope you appreciate this essay. This is your warm-up, so do the 4 analyses and rank them, then do your own little workup here on Save the Whale, Screw the Shrimp as your post for today. And this is going to prime you for your paper, which will begin soon. All right, thank you for your time, everyone.